first one that's usually skeptical when we hear these charges on the alleged quote unquote political correctness here and there. It definitely exists, and I think it should be combated. But usually, when we're told this or that is politically correct, it turns out to be a false alarm. And here I do think it's real. It's not major. In fact, the controversy I think has already gone away, but it is very curious. And I admit I do like Tim Burton, though I think I like his early work a lot more than his later work. And Wednesday is a kind of happy exception. So, Tim Burton, racist. Okay, all right. Why? Apparently, some black characters in Wednesday are being portrayed negatively and they're being framed as villains, and that's about it. So, like many normal people, I'm head scratching. Like, well, that doesn't give us evidence of racism, so I'm gonna need a little bit more. But there is a little bit more that these alleged activists cited, namely that he had this very suspicious quote for an earlier film. And I actually came across this from another video way before this controversy. So I was aware of this quote, and I do admit, it is a very weird quote, and it's not the best quote available, but I don't think it's evidence of racism, but it does show that Burton is that he's perhaps not as liberal as we all thought he was, but that's about it. So what does he say? Well, he's just basically saying when he grew up watching blaxploitation films, he didn't really mind or care that there weren't more quote white characters, and presumably that answers why he doesn't actually have quote non-white characters in his films. Now he does, if you look at his films carefully, he does, but you also can't deny, for the most part, the main characters he focuses on with Johnny Depp and other key performers do tend to be white. Do tend to be white. Again, the focus is on in Planet of the Apes on Mark Wahlberg with the Johnny Depp films, whether he's playing a vampire or you name it, Todd, or other cases. Edward Scissorhands, we're mainly concentrating on white characters. There are some exceptions, like the Batman films do actually feature quite a range of different ethnicities and races. But again, on the whole, yes, he does concentrate on quote, white characters. Can't deny that. But I don't think that's evidence of racism. And I've only seen a little bit of Wednesday, but from what I saw, I don't think there's anything there. I mean, we have several Hispanic actors in the main cast. Wednesday herself is actually played by a Hispanic woman. And we have Luis. It just doesn't make any sense. We see them in the opening credits too, that we definitely have non white performers. So I'm not getting evidence of racism in Wednesday. But then we get the charge of unconscious racism, which is kind of hilarious because how could you possibly not be racist by that accounting? I mean, almost anything could then be used as evidence. I think that's pretty stupid too. But is there some evidence that he has some biases in the way he does stories? Because I know with Robin, he was going to make Robin black with Marlon Wayans, but they ended up not going with that version of Batman. He also made Harvey Dent black, which people often forget. So I think it's a little mixed. Yes, he often does use white characters, and he sometimes is guilty of whitewashing. So again, we have to be careful, look at each case. But he also does the opposite too. He does sometimes blackwashing. He just does what he thinks is artistically and just commercially will do well for the film. So I think that's probably the thing. Even diehard Burton fans, I think, have gone a little too far in making him this very auteur artistic director, where he's a much more commercially minded director than I think people suspect. And yes, he does do things that are quote, critical of this or that political agenda, but it stays within a certain range. I think on the whole, this whole racism controversy, there's nothing there. It's really just some people trying to gain more attention for themselves, and they're literally promoting their work while they're insulting Tim Burton. But I would agree he's probably guilty of a few unconscious biases that we do sometimes see in his work. Nothing too alarming, but they are there. I mean, you do have to be honest that Wednesday is very exceptional, not just in terms of, well, I like it, whereas a lot of his recent work I think is just okay. But yeah, he doesn't often have like a non-white character or a non-white star that he works with for the most part. And if you do think it through, like, well, how many times does he have a Hispanic woman as the lead star? Yeah, it's very few times, but I don't think there's any evidence of racism in any strong sense. But is there some biases he does with casting and perhaps when constructing the stories or who he collaborates with? Maybe. That just suggests that Tim Burton is perhaps more conservative than a lot of his fans even think he is. Again, not like full blown political conservative, but he is perhaps a little bit more conservative than I think we thought he was from looking at just his earlier films. And that's about it. And I guess if you're alarmed at any version of conservatism, you should panic. But I think we have to take it on a case by case basis. If somebody likes Edmund Burke, I don't necessarily think they're a diehard racist. I grant, if they're part of the radical right into conspiracy theories, like a certain Mr. Kanye West, then yes, I'm going to get suspicious they may have racist feelings. But I don't see Tim Burton as a radical right wing nutcase. Maybe that's just me.